My friends, Caverns Agent 101, the GoldenEye speedrun world record originally set by Marc Rützou in July 2011, is cementing itself into the history books as one of the most truly remarkable records in the history of the game, especially as Father Time continues to march on and on. Let me explain. You see, Caverns is the penultimate, or second last stage, in the iconic video game GoldenEye 007, leading up to Cradle, where the final battle with Trevelyan takes place. This is of course aside from the bonus stages, Aztec and Egypt. On the Agent difficulty, the easiest difficulty, Caverns only has one objective: minimize scientist casualties, which effectively means that the entire objective of the level is to run to the end as quickly as possible. At least from a speedrun perspective. These become iconic stages in speedrunning as we see players grinding for countless hours to get runs with lucky guard boosts while strafing as perfectly as possible and hopefully reducing as much lag as possible for the cleanest possible speedrun. This almost turns GoldenEye from a shooter game into more of a racing game, optimizing every turn, corner, and every action of movement. Alright, in summer 2011, two legendary GoldenEye speedrunners, Marc Rützou and Clemens, were both trying to lower the record on Caverns Agent from 102 to 101, feeling such a thing could be possible with the recently discovered knowledge that using Control Style 2.2 could start the stage in full speed, saving about 0.36 seconds, which was just enough belief that 101 could be eked out on a perfect run. And it was. Marc got a beautiful 3-boost run on July 3rd, 2011, only to be followed by Clemens tying the score on July 14th, 2011, 11 days later. Now, all that is good and dandy, but here's where the loreful impact of this record comes in. More than 14 years later, Caverns Agent 101 is still the world record. That's not common for a record in GoldenEye speedrunning to get to be 14 years old before being broken. It's the oldest record that still stands in GoldenEye 007 speedrunning, and with each passing day, with no one breaking it and getting 1 minute, the record inches closer and closer to historic immortality, at least as it pertains to GoldenEye speedrunning. Check this out. This is the list of oldest standing records in GoldenEye 007. The next oldest records are Runway Secret Agent 22 by Big Boss Man and my very own Streets Secret Agent 154, which are really cool in their own right, certainly stories for another time, but here's where it gets really interesting. When we look at the chart of the longest standing records in GoldenEye all time, including those which have been broken, we see that Caverns Agent 101 is entering rarefied air as the 5th oldest GoldenEye world record ever, and the 4 records that stand before it have insanely deep lore unto themselves. You see, these 4 records, Runway Agent 22 by Boss, Dam Agent 53 by Boss, Bunker 1 Agent 17 by Wouter, and Archives Agent 16 by Boss, have long been viewed as a sort of package or collection in the GoldenEye community. These records are some of the most iconic from the Boss Wouter era, roughly 2002 to 2004, in the early days of the internet, early speedrunning, and truly foundational days of speedrunning as it would go on to be established. These were records that pushed the envelope in terms of optimizing and maximizing records, taking speedrunning from what amounted to passionate and enthused gameplay to truly significant grinds, working to carve out every frame until they were able to lower a record to the next full second. Dam Agent 53 has incredibly deep lore, where the first claimed tie was by a man of Dan Berube, and it was never proven, but through circumstantial evidence, the moderators of the community at the time decided to put the time on the rankings anyways. This was seen as highly controversial for over a decade until the time was finally removed in 2015. Ilu, an iconic GoldenEye speedrunner in his own right, was the first player to provably tie Dam 53, which he did in November 2004. The Runway Agent 22 of Boss and Bunker 117 of Wouter were often seen as sorts of dueling world records, one iconic one from each player, and when pondering the game's best records back then, one would be hard-pressed to choose one over the other. Both of these remained untied until 2006, when a relatively unknown Canadian speedrunner by the name of Mouserscribe shocked the community by tying both only a few months apart. Boss's Archives Agent 16 is a little less loreful than those other three records, but it still fits this group for a couple of reasons. One being simply the length of time it existed as a record, but the other being that over the years, as the early 2000s entered the 2010s and the early Twitch era, and with the advantage of the sum of knowledge that was learned and shared over the years, these all became pretty commonly tied records. Once great, now reaching dozens if not hundreds of people sharing a tied world record on these stages. This was so often the case through the years 2014 to 2017, when many new players joined the community from learning about the game via speedrun marathon events or YouTube content, that these four records eventually became known as the Boring Four. Four once great, but now relatively simple and optimized records that most new players would attempt to achieve, getting their first 4 world records into their foray in GoldenEye speedrunning. Now, all these 4 records were beaten, 3 of them by Carl Jobst on his incredible run of records into late 2017 and early 2018, and the Runway Agent 21 being achieved by a player, Eric Berg, in 2020. And these new records are sometimes referred to as the Fantastic Four, though this nomenclature has fallen out of use lately, especially now that Carl's Dam 52 has been tied by dozens of players thanks to a new strategy there, speeding up the way in which we pass through the gate. But I digress. You see, as we look at the list of GoldenEye records that stood the longest, we can clearly see that Marc Rützou's Caverns 101 is now in that same legacy as the Boring Four. In fact, it has joined them as the only records to ever last over 5,000 days as a world record without being broken. So what gives, and will it ever be broken? Now here's the part of the video, something I'm trying lately, where I script the first little bit and then share my unfiltered thoughts, unscripted here in the latter half. And the thing with Marc Rützou's Caverns Agent 101 that makes it really crazy for a few reasons is, 4 years ago, I made a video asking, is Caverns Agent 1 minute possible? That's 4 years ago now. That was when the record was 10 years old. And the conclusion we came to is that, yeah. And it felt like people were actually pretty close to getting Caverns Agent 1 minute, which would be an amazing world record, but we've seen amazing world records happen throughout history. Mark and Clemens's original 101s had 3 boosts, and we've seen now people get 101 with only 2 boosts. So this suffices to reason that with 5 or 6 boosts, something that is possible and has been seen on Caverns, one could get 1 minute. And it just hasn't happened yet. There have been runs with 5 or 6 boosts, but they've not been the perfectly strafed runs that are capable of getting 1 minute, and the perfectly strafed runs didn't get enough boost to get the time. We've seen a few players deeply attempt this time. Ilu and Joris notably have 30 plus duplications of Caverns Agent 101, which is quite a lot. They've put in a significant grind, as have some other players, and they've just not quite gotten the run. There's not been too many strategy developments. It's a pretty straightforward, simple strafing level, but a couple things that have been found are the use of the timed mines on the stage. I remember even 20 years ago now, almost, seeing threads on the forums discussing, could we use these timed mines on Caverns Agent to self-boost? And the answer is not as simple as you might initially think it is to be. On Secret Agent and Double Agent, you use them to destroy the consoles, completing another objective, which we don't have on Agent. So it does open up the possibility of using them somehow. This is pretty tricky. We've figured a few ways to use them, maybe shooting them as you strafe by, but this wasn't super consistent. And then a couple guys, Blue Khakis and White Ted, figured a couple of throws around the spiral area where they detonate in such a way that you could get 1 or 2 boosts off of them. The fuse in the time mines is 5 seconds long, so it's very hard to throw the mine exactly 5 seconds ahead of you without losing more time than you would save from the boost. But there are a couple of known strategies that could be used, And again, they just haven't really been made consistent enough or put into use by especially the grinders for 1 minute like Ilu and Joris, where we see them meaningfully save time on the run. Aside from this, it has been found that placing a mine near the bottom of the spiral does help in reducing lag overall in the stage. You know, it explodes, a few guards pass away, less lag later on, pretty standard stuff in GoldenEye. And there is a box boost, which you get at the top of the spiral. You can shoot the box out and boost yourself, which is a more consistent boost, which is nice to get. And so there have been these slight innovations, but no one's been able to get 1 minute yet. Another thing that makes Marc's 101 so insanely loreful is his whole history that I've gotten into in a video before, where his original 101 has actually become lost media. And as it stands today, it's probably the most significant piece of lost media in GoldenEye speedrunning. And this actually happened because in 2015, when the debate sort of wore on about something I mentioned earlier, Dan Berube's claimed Dam 53, which was eventually removed from the rankings, Marc, kind of went kooky, as sometimes we do, especially online back in the day, and he deleted a bunch of his old records, which were in sort of weak quality. His famous Dam records were saved because people had downloaded these files and restored them, but his Caverns 101 just slipped through the cracks. No one that we know of has downloaded it, and it lasted on the hard drive to be re-uploaded. So his original 101 is missing. Marc eventually duplicated 101 in 2019, so he has proven that he got the time, and in the history books, it's established that, Marc was the first to get it. People did watch the run at the time, but that run is gone. And so this really makes it as loreful and as historic, as storied of a record as the sort of boring four which it is looking to join. When you think of the game's most iconic records, Runway 22 and Bunker 117, records that I myself watched for the first time on Speed Demos Archive all the way back in 2005, before YouTube was just barely a thing and speedrunning was mostly in the niche corners of the internet. But really, Marc's Caverns Agent 101 is now entering that group, and I think it is fair to do so. I think it is deserving of that honor. I mean, after all, it's 14 years old now, still unbeaten. And I mean, look, 2011 is a heck of a lot closer to 2005 or even 2002 than it is to today, believe it or not, which is, I know, a shock for some, but it is true. But hey, I was just looking at the list of the oldest standing GoldenEye speedruns, and I was going to do a video about the top 10 or so. I might still do that. But Marc's 101 reaching 5,000 days and really reaching into that boring four or historic four records spoke to me, and I wanted to discuss it in this way. So hey, thanks for watching. There's a little bit about Marc's Caverns 101. Will 1 minute happen this year? Will it ever happen? If it doesn't happen for 2 more years, then the 101 could become the longest standing record in GoldenEye history. It's a very real thing that can happen, and that would be crazy. But hey, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, my friends, stay true, and I'll see you in the next stream or video.